This is a 1995 Saab 9000 Aero. The Saab 9000 was a Swedish executive class car that competed with other cars like the BMW 5 Series, the Volvo 850, the Audi 5000, and others. Sadly, Saab built their last car as Saab in 2012, although a holding company kept the name around until 2014. But Saab had a very long history of building some very unique, special, and quirky cars. But this is one of the special ones. I am not Doug DeMuro, and this is not endorsed by him in any way. But today I'm going to review this car, show you all the quirks and features, then I will get it on the road and I'll give it my driving score based on how I interpret Doug DeMuro's rubric method for evaluating cars. So let's talk Saab 9000 Aero. The Saab 9000 was designed by Bjorn Invall in Sweden and Giorgio Gigaro, which I know I'm not saying correctly, at Italia Design. While it was related to the Alfa Romeo 164, the Lancia Thema, and the Fiat Croma, it only shared about 7% of the same parts. This was distinctly a Saab with many of the usual and some unusual Saab quirks and features. The Saab 9000 is what the US called a large car, but in European standards it was identified as an executive class car. It had a 105-inch wheelbase and was 188 inches in length, and weighed in at a light 3,200 pounds. This and a reasonably efficient drag coefficient of 0.3 is part of what contributes to the car's performance that it has. Saab was founded in 1937 in Trollhättan, Sweden as Svenska Aeroplan Aktiebolag, which I'm sure I'm also not saying correctly, but that is Swedish for Swedish Airplane Company Limited. In 1995, the Saab 9000 Aero was the top-of-the-line vehicle Saab produced that year. It was described in the media as a distinctive, powerful, safe, environmentally friendly, and fine-handling sports sedan. This specific example is a fully loaded Aero that had every option from the factory. I happen to have owned this car from when it was new. All right, I'm going to start off by talking about the quirks and features, and we'll start with the interior. Saab's marketing tagline for years was "Born from Jets." And when you slip inside the cabin, you do get the sense of being in a cockpit. In 1995, the Aero had some distinctive features from the regular Saab 9000, but as I noted earlier, some of the more distinctive features on the inside of the car are the very large, overstuffed seats that, in this case, are two-tone leather. Black interior cars had the same pattern, but all the panels were black. These seats provided improved lateral support for spirited driving, but also gave a very comfortable ride for long road trips. This car was featured for both luxury and performance. One of the quirks in this car is the glove box, and you would think it would be here. And it would have been here on the older Saab 9000, but by 1995 the safety features of the car was a paramount concern, so they replaced the glove box and fitted it with an airbag. That leaves the center console as the only lockable interior storage location. Although when this car came from the factory, it was mostly filled up with a pair of cup holders. I removed that from the car, and it's somewhere in my garage. The audio system features audio system by Harman Kardon, and it really is a quite impressive sound system, with speakers filling the large cabin with great sound quality. This car had a standard AM/FM cassette main unit, but also featured an in-dash CD player. But because that wasn't enough in the trunk there was also a 6-disc CD changer that was great for long road trips. The radio also had a couple unusual features. One is this little removable faceplate that was really nice and small. It would allow you to put it in your pocket and take it with you. And underneath that would say security code, because that was part of the security system, the special Saab anti-theft security system. This car featured also an unusual feature on the radio that was a button that was marked WB. WB stands for weather band. So if you want to know what the weather is, just press that button and it will tell you the weather for the nearest couple hundred miles from your location. They still broadcast, at least in Southern California, in weather band. This car also features a full automatic climate control and heating system with heated exterior mirrors, as well as front and rear window defrosters near the door locks. Something that is really not a common feature on cars today, let alone cars of that era. Some of the quirky features are the clock, which also included buttons like average speed, speed warning that would beep if you exceed the speed that you had set, an arrival time estimate, and distance to destination. These are features that would have been much easier to use in the era of GPS and onboard maps, although most of that today would have been replaced by Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The clock also featured a button that would control the display on the dashboard that would roll between voltage, miles to empty, outside temperature, and average miles per gallon. On the dashboard were clean gauges that included an analog tachometer, speedometer, engine temperature, fuel gauge with low fuel warning light, and a boost and vacuum gauge. Other readouts include the instant miles per gallon feedback and a shift up light. Very handy feature. There's also another feature that was a bit ahead of its time. That was this little pictograph here in the dashboard that shows when a door is open. It shows you actually what specific door is open, not just a door ajar light. It would also tell you if the trunk was open, or if there was low oil pressure. A little oil can would appear and illuminate under the hood of the pictograph. The car features cruise control and the turn signal stock, and also wiper blade control and washer fluid, and the front and rear window, and even wipers for the headlights with a squirter built into the wiper arm of the headlights. All this is great when you're dealing with off-road and snowy conditions, and it's all fairly intuitive of how to use it. The upper console features this really cool eyeball light that you can move around and focus where you want to illuminate. The car also features a sunroof moonroof system that can pop up for ventilation or slide back into the roofline. The steering wheel is a sporty leather-wrapped steering wheel with an airbag. No buttons, just nice and simple, just the horn, the way it used to be. The steering wheel does not tilt, but it can slide in and out. To the right of the steering column is the 3-level heated seat controls for the front driver and passenger seat. There's also a TCS button that could enable you to disable the traction control system if you just wanted to let the front wheel spin. To the left of the steering wheel was a rotary headlight control that featured daytime running lights, something that was part of the safety thinking of Saab. Below that knob there were 2 light switches. One is the driving lights for the lower front bumper, and the other is a very useful but quirky feature. It controlled a single, very bright fog light that you would use to let people know in fog when there was a car in front of them when visibility was really poor. So while we're back here, I want to point out there's only one reverse light on the trunk in the opposite symmetrical location of the fog light. But there are actually 3 reverse lights on this car, one in the back and the other in each of the front fenders in the turn signal area. This illuminates the area when you're in reverse next to the front fenders, so when you're backing out you can avoid hitting things when you're in parking spaces and turning. Speaking of reverse, this is one of the few cars I know of that featured a synchromesh reverse gear. So you could actually pop it into reverse while you're drifting forward. It's kind of an interesting quirk and feature. The driver's door had a power mirror control for the exterior heated mirror. And the exterior heated mirrors were kind of an unusual feature at the time, something kind of unique to Saab because they're dealing with cold. But they also had a button to open the trunk. And you'll notice that there are no window controls on the front doors. The window controls on the sunroof and the windows are actually located right here in the center console. For both the driver and passenger control everything in one location, including the power door lock location. Both front seats are 8-way power adjustable, but the driver's seat has 3 memory positions too, something also fairly uncommon in 1995. A very unusual feature to this day is each of the doors had vents that aimed at the window to reduce fogging of the side windows. That was true not only of the front windows, front roll-down windows, but also the rear roll-down windows. And of course, the car had an electric rear window defogger to defrost the massive rear window. The back seats also feature the same overstuffed bucket seats and matching headrests, but the middle seat, not a great middle seat. You could put a 5th person there, but they're really tight because each of these rear bucket seats are actually as wide as the front bucket seats. Something that a lot of cars today, they really don't put the attention to detail on the rear seats. This car really had it all. Each of the seat backs also had a small upper pouch and a larger pouch, plus door pocket pouches for each side. There was a rear ashtray right here, but there was no lighter for the rear passengers. Each door had a conventional rear window switch, but they also featured these great rear reading lights for the backseat passengers so they would not be a distraction for the driver because they were just out of the field of view of the driver's rear view mirror. The keys also had an unusual hard-to-copy security system that would engage or disengage with a button push or locking of either of the front doors. The car also featured an under-seat vents to allow air to flow for the backseat passengers to be very comfortable, not only out of the doors, but also out of the door pockets themselves. There was a vent in the doors and under the seats. So it was actually really nice because there's a lot of headroom, a lot of leg room. This car was actually very comfortable for road trips. It's just a really, really spacious interior, and these very comfortable bucket seats make it wonderful for 4 people to go on a road trip. Just don't put a 5th person here. The trunk is actually very large at 23.5 cubic feet, and you'll see there's a large space. You can fold this back and you can actually just pull this down as well and get it out of the way. It makes it really handy. And if you fold down the seats, and I should say if you can fold down the seats, because those overstuffed seats really make it virtually impossible to really lay flat. But there's a cargo net over here, and there's a spare set of tools with a factory set of Saab clean white gloves. And of course on this side was the CD changer. Underneath here is the compact spare tire. The manual is also nicely wrapped in leather, something very common of European luxury cars of the era, with all the documentation and everything in it. So let's look under the hood of the car. Saab developed in 1992 a new 32-bit Saab Trionic engine management system that consisted of an engine control unit, or ECU, that controlled 3 different engine aspects: ignition timing, fuel injection, that also acts as a boost controller. The system was one of the first cars to use direct injection that removed the distributor and plug wires and is directly coil on each plug. The manual transmission Aeros, as I mentioned, also came with a special engine that was very powerful at 225 horsepower for a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine that put out a whopping 258 pounds-feet of torque at a low 1,850 revs per minute. This enabled the relatively light sedan to pull off comparable performance figures to some of the best 1960s muscle cars. Figures like 0 to 60 in the mid to low 6-second range and quarter-mile times at 14.8 at just under 100 miles per hour, with a top speed of 149 miles per hour, and some magazines actually rated it at 155. This is very impressive for a little 4-cylinder engine with a very large car and front-wheel drive. In fact, all the engine tweaks that Saab did with the car, with that Aero engine, the engine really had an impressive 14% higher volumetric efficiency than a Porsche 911 Carrera 3.6. It's quite a feat for a little 2.3-liter 4-cylinder from Saab. The Trionic engine management system that Saab used, described in 1995 as being run by a brain as powerful as an office computer that maximizes performance and economy with a minimum of emissions. I also remember reading an article about how much more massive the computer power of this car was when comparing to the computers that put men on the moon. It's also so clean, in fact, that independent tests done at the time showed air coming in from the outside compared to the exhaust was actually cleaner than what it sucked in at the front. Now, granted, these tests were done in London city traffic at the time, but that's still pretty impressive. The car emissions comfortably outperformed the new ultra-low emissions vehicles, or ULEV standards, that will not even be mandated for another 9 years, and it still runs cleaner than many cars being built today. It was EPA rated at 21 city and 28 highway, but I often get well over 30 miles per gallon, even with 4 people in the car and a trunk full of luggage. But with its 17.4 gallon gas tank, I have seen more than 500 miles on a tank on a road trip. The broad torque band also makes the car fun and easy to drive, with the torque starting low, and it pulls really hard all the way to redline. In fact, 2nd gear driving can range from 10 to 67 miles an hour, and 5th gear can drive all the way from 34 miles per hour all the way up to that top speed. I was mentioning earlier that the cockpit feeling of the interior of this car is very much like Saab's tagline, "Born from Jets." Well, Saab was ever the innovator and took that into a new level in 1992 when they modified a Saab 9000 by removing the steering wheel and replaced it with a side-mounted joystick. While the concept, thankfully, never went anywhere, they were trying to eliminate the danger of having a steering wheel for the driver to be hit in an accident. This vehicle platform also experimented with other features like drive-by-wire, adaptive cruise control, infrared camera systems for seeing items in low light conditions, overnight heat storage accumulator to eliminate cold starts, and a solar roof panel that would automatically ventilate the cabin when the car is parked in the sun. Saab was truly an innovative company. Let's get this one out and take it on the road and see how it drives. And here we go, driving the Saab 9000 Aero. Really nice, easy shifting, going uphill. You know, I'm up to 2,000 RPM. It's saying time to shift, you're going to over rev it, even though the car will pull really hard right to its red line. It's just been a absolutely fantastic car for these almost 27 years I've had this car, and it has just been really great. Really optimal for a road trip. Not as always as much fun in stop and go traffic as any stick shift car is really not as much fun in stop and go traffic. This car really likes to be on the highway, just cruising at highway speeds. You kick the cruise control on, kick back, nice and simple. You know, it's kind of an interesting experience driving a car with a steering wheel that has a horn, and that's all. It's doesn't have all the buttons and knobs. This car has dedicated buttons and knobs for pretty much all of its functions, and I think that's actually one of the nice things about it, is that it really just is super easy to use because everything has a place, everything has a location, and it's kind of a neat feature. And going uphill again. Definitely quick acceleration. Nice and comfortable, easy to drive. I went first, second, fifth because there's no reason to go any faster, and pulls really hard. Right now I'm alone in the car, but I've had a car full of people with luggage in the trunk, and it pulls really hard right to red line and pushes you back in the seat. Definitely a fun executive class car. I've always found the window position odd for everyone else in the car because they're not used to it. They're used to looking at the door panel. But I find, because my hand's already on the shifter, so being able to roll the windows up and down or open the sunroof or lock the doors or unlock the doors is super easy when your hand's already down here. You don't have to switch hands to open or close the windows. It just makes it really, really easy to control and navigate with this car. Yeah, in 1995, they knew how to make a car really solid. This is the second generation of the Saab 9000. The first generation came out in 1984. So this being a second generation Saab 9000, they really tweaked all the little things and just improved the form, function, quality. Just absolutely a fun car to drive. And a nice executive class car for taking on the road. That is the Saab 9000 Aero. Now let's give it a Larry score. As I mentioned near the beginning of this video is not sanctioned by Doug in any way, but I used his published rubric for scoring cars, and I tried to be as fair as possible. I want to make it clear, this is not a Doug score, but my Larry score. I then compared it to other cars that Doug has scored in a similar way. Using that method, I give this car a 25 on the weekend score and a 30 on the daily category, for a total of 55. For an older car with plenty of personality, quirks and features, I think the 1995 Saab 9000 Aero actually holds up reasonably well. I think it's a shame that Saab ended making cars when they did. I really would have liked to have seen what they would have done in the automotive world today.